It's Ash from Super Videos back for another Walking Dead Throwback Thursday video, top 5 season finales of The Walking Dead. Now I am releasing this video a day in advance. I usually do these on Thursdays, hence the name Throwback Thursday. I probably won't have a lot of time to do any videos tomorrow, so that's why I am releasing this a day in advance. Before jumping into this video, I wanted to showcase this The Walking Dead t-shirt that I designed. If you're interested to purchasing these, you can go to my merch store. The link will be in the description. Check out the site if you are interested in purchasing any of the merch. So with that said, let's jump right into this video. At number 5, we have Season 2, Episode 13, Beside the Dying Fire. Even though it's an old episode, it is definitely one of my favorite finales of The Walking Dead. The farm being overrun and all of the crazy stuff that kind of went into that, and how everything kind of led towards that moment where we have everyone trying to flee for their lives and everything. So I absolutely loved how that was done, and in a way, because it was a smaller kind of environment, it was a smaller group, the threat seemed bigger. The next big thing in this episode that I think is one of the key points of the story, the series, not only for that season but for the entire series, was Rick revealing to everyone that they're all infected. I absolutely loved that scene, and I think even at this point, if you go back and watch that scene, you appreciate it a lot more, and you love that scene even more now watching it and seeing everyone's reaction and just seeing how smaller the world was at that time. The last thing which I absolutely loved about this episode was Michonne's introduction and her zombified friends. I absolutely loved that. I think Michonne's introduction is one of the most iconic introductions on The Walking Dead history, next to big characters like Negan and some of the others. So this episode comes at number 5, my favorite finales of The Walking Dead. And to be honest, this being Michonne's introduction had a lot to do with why I chose this episode. At number 4, we have Season 7, Episode 16, The First Day of the Rest of Your Life. This was a great episode. I think for a Season 7 that was underwhelming and a letdown, the finale really left up to expectations, and it delivered a great episode. I wouldn't say it was the best episode ever, but for a finale, it was definitely an iconic and one that you remember even up to this point. It's one that many fans definitely do consider as one of the best episodes of the season, of Season 7. Some great storylines being introduced and some great reveals, like Dwight switching over. We got that big reveal in this episode, which was great to see. We had Negan and the Saviors rolling up at Alexandria's gates, so that was absolutely great to see as well. We had, of course, the Scavengers double-crossing Rick and the Survivors and joining the Saviors. Another good twist in the story. Many people saw it coming, but looking back at it now, it was definitely one of those pretty cool scenes as well. We had the zombified Sasha scene, which was absolutely great, which was a remix of the Holly scene from the comic book. We have the scene with Michonne fighting the Scavenger as well. Now this scene is when they're up in the tower, and it's actually a remixed version of the Andrea scene in the comic book, which is one of many iconic Andrea scenes from the comic book. So that's another great scene in this episode. We have second lineup scene, or the Lucille lineup scene. Then from there, we have Shiva and King Ezekiel coming in and saving the day just when Negan is about to Lucille Carl. Another great scene in this episode. And then we have All Out War beginning officially in this episode, or at the end of this episode. So that's another great iconic scene from the comics coming to life. At number 3, we have Season 5, Episode 16, called Conquer. This was one of those pretty cool episodes where it has a lot of replay value going back to it, and there's just a lot of great moments in this episode. This is, of course, the episode where Morgan returns. Morgan is officially back in this episode after a lot of teasing. One of the key themes of this story, the Morgan storyline, which is absolutely great to see. And of course, Morgan saving Daryl and Aaron just as they're about to be overrun by the walkers. We have the Rick speech, which is one of my favorite Rick speeches in this episode, where he's talking about how he was thinking about how many of the Alexandrians he had to kill to save them. I didn't do that speech justice by the way I said it, but if you've seen that episode, you know what I'm talking about. So another great moment in this episode. And of course, we have Pete killing Reggie, which was one of those shocking scenes as well. that I absolutely loved, the intensity of it. And of course, what comes after is Rick executing Pete, which was another great moment to see. And of course, the episode ends with Morgan and Rick reuniting and meeting again. And I absolutely loved seeing Morgan back, especially seeing him interact with the characters again. And one of the key reasons why I even chose this episode was for Morgan's return and the great stuff with Rick in this episode. At number 2, we have season 4, episode 16, called A. This episode was one of those great episodes, and this episode was one of the iconic episodes. I absolutely loved every single bit of this episode, starting with Rick biting Joe's neck. I would say one of the most iconic Rick scenes of the series. And, I just loved it, the intensity of it, the emotions, how that scene came to be. I absolutely loved everything about it. And of course, this is also the episode where we have the Rick-Daryl conversation that leads to Rick saying, "You're my brother." Absolutely loved that. After the whole Joe storyline, we have the Terminus storyline officially beginning. So we have everyone arriving at Terminus and being surrounded at Terminus and being captured by the termites. Absolutely great stuff. The reunion at the cart, everyone seeing each other again, some meeting for the first time, like Abraham's group. Absolutely loved all of that. And then the episode ends with one of the most iconic and badass things Rick has ever said. Of course, he was censored in the TV show version, but on the Blu-ray version, the Rick line saying, "They're fucking with the wrong people." Absolutely iconic, absolutely exciting to see. But at number 1, I have season 6, episode 16, Last Day on Earth. This episode is still up to this date my favorite Walking Dead finale. Everything about this episode I loved, absolutely. The way the saviors were built up in this episode, from the roadblocks to the Carol stuff, the Carol Morgan stuff, all of that, I absolutely loved that. And I think the introduction of the saviors has got to be one of the best introductions of a villainous group on The Walking Dead. They did a great job with the Whispers, and at this point I would say the way they introduced the Whispers was done better than the Saviors, but I absolutely loved what they did with the introduction of the Saviors. And of course, in this episode, we have Savage Morgan back. Absolutely love that. Great stuff from Morgan in this episode. And it's also the episode where we have the introduction of the Kingdom, or our first look at the Kingdom. So that's another great moment in this episode that makes this episode iconic. We have the scene where we have the survivors being surrounded by the saviors. I don't have to say much about this. That was terrific stuff. Everything about that specific scene, everything that led up to Negan's introduction, I absolutely enjoyed. And of course, we have the Negan introduction in this episode, but obviously the cliffhanger did hurt the episode a lot. But even so, even with that, this episode is my favorite finale of The Walking Dead. But that's basically my top 5 finales of The Walking Dead. Let me know your list in the comment section below. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video. If you like what you see, press like, subscribe for more content, and press the bell button to receive notifications for daily uploads.